Hello, I'm Dr. Nancy. I want to ask you one question. Circumcised or uncircumcised? Which is healthier? Have you ever found yourself sitting in a quiet moment, maybe sipping your morning coffee or reading the paper, and a question suddenly crosses your mind? A question about something simple but important. Like, does it really make a difference whether a man is circumcised or not? It's not exactly the kind of thing that comes up casually over lunch with friends, especially as we get older. But it is a question that's worth asking, especially when we're thinking about long-term health, cleanliness, and well-being for ourselves or for the men in our lives. Now, if you're watching this, there's a good chance you've been curious about it. Maybe you're a gentleman yourself, or perhaps you're thinking about your partner, your sons, or even your grandsons. Whatever the reason, it's natural to wonder, is there really a health difference between being circumcised or uncircumcised? And at our age, does it still matter? That's exactly what we're going to talk about today. I'm here to have an honest, friendly chat with you about this topic. No awkwardness, no judgment, just good, straightforward information. We'll be exploring what the differences are, how each option can affect hygiene, potential health risks, and even sexual health. I promise to keep things clear and approachable, so you can feel confident about what you learned today. So, let's begin with the basics. Circumcision is the surgical removal of the foreskin, which is the fold of skin that covers the tip of the penis. Some men have it done as infants, while for others, it's a choice made later in life, sometimes for medical reasons. In many parts of the world, circumcision is routine, while in others, it's far less common. You might know friends or family members on either side of this, and maybe you've never really thought about it beyond that. But when we look a little deeper, there are a few key things that stand out. Things that can affect our health in small ways that add up over time. One of the first points to consider is hygiene. As we age, maintaining good hygiene becomes even more important. For men who are uncircumcised, the foreskin creates a little pocket where moisture, oils, and sometimes bacteria can collect. If it's not cleaned regularly and properly, this can lead to irritation or even infection. It's not that uncircumcised men are unclean, far from it. It just means they need to pay a bit more attention when washing. Imagine it like this. Think about wearing a hat all day. If you never take it off to let your head breathe or give it a wash, things can get a little sweaty and unpleasant under there, right? It's a similar idea. That foreskin acts as a cover, and if not looked after, it can cause some minor issues that can grow into bigger ones down the line. Now, some of you might be thinking, but I've gotten this far in life and never had a problem. And that's absolutely valid. Plenty of uncircumcised men live long, healthy lives without a single issue. But it's also true that as we get older, our skin gets a little thinner, our immune system slows down a touch, and things that didn't bother us at 40 or 50 might start to show up when we hit 60 or 70. Regular hygiene becomes even more essential, and for some, circumcision can simplify that routine. That brings me to the second point. Medical conditions related to the foreskin. One of the most common issues is called phimosis. That's when the foreskin becomes too tight to pull back comfortably, which can make cleaning difficult and even cause discomfort or pain. Phimosis isn't unusual in older men because skin loses some of its elasticity over time. And if cleaning is hard or painful, there's a risk of developing infections like balanitis, which is inflammation of the head of the penis. Let me put it another way. Just like some folks develop arthritis in their hands as they age and find it harder to open jars, some men find that their foreskin doesn't move like it used to. When that happens, doctors might recommend circumcision even later in life, simply because it makes hygiene easier and prevents repeated infections or irritation. Now, I know the idea of surgery at this stage of life might sound daunting. Nobody really wants to think about going under the knife if they don't have to, right? But it's worth noting that adult circumcision is generally a straightforward procedure. Recovery does take a little longer than it does for infants, of course. But for those who face recurring issues like phimosis or frequent infections, it can be a relief, not just physically, but also mentally. Knowing that the problem is resolved can bring peace of mind, and that's something we all value as we age. So, at this point, you might be wondering whether circumcision has any other health impacts besides hygiene and these specific conditions. That's a fair question, and we'll definitely be exploring that next. But for now, it's important to pause and think about what we've just discussed. How circumcision or not having circumcision can influence everyday things like washing and managing minor health concerns. Whether you or someone close to you is circumcised or not, the key takeaway is that paying attention to hygiene and being aware of possible changes as we get older is really the heart of the matter. It's about looking after yourself, staying informed, and making choices that support your health in the long run. And as we move forward, we'll continue exploring this topic from other angles, looking at potential links between circumcision and risks for certain diseases, as well as how both options might affect intimacy and personal comfort. Because health isn't just about avoiding sickness. It's also about living life fully and comfortably, no matter what age we are. Now that we've had a chance to talk about hygiene and some of the medical conditions that can come along with or without circumcision, let's take a deeper breath and get into something that's often quietly wondered about, but not so often discussed openly: how circumcision, or the lack of it, might affect overall health risks in a broader sense. We're not just talking about keeping things clean or avoiding discomfort. We're talking about bigger health concerns that can really impact quality of life, especially as we age. One area where this topic often comes up is in relation to infections, specifically urinary tract infections, or UTIs. You may have heard about UTIs being more common in women, and that's true, but men can get them too, especially as we get older, and our immune defenses aren't quite as strong as they used to be. Now, studies have shown that men who are uncircumcised have a slightly higher chance of developing a UTI, particularly if cleaning isn't as thorough, or if the foreskin becomes difficult to retract due to phimosis or similar issues. It's not an enormous risk, but it's there. For some men, that small difference can add up, especially if they already have health concerns like diabetes or other conditions that make infections harder to fight off. Imagine you've got a small leak under your sink. At first, it's hardly noticeable, just a drip now and then. But over time, if it's not looked after, it can lead to mold or damage to the wood beneath it. That's sort of what these small health risks are like. Left unchecked, they can develop into bigger problems. Moving beyond UTIs, there's also the question of sexually transmitted infections, or STIs. Now, I know some folks might think, well, I'm not exactly living the wild life these days. And sure, many of us settle down as we get older. But intimacy doesn't necessarily stop as we age, and it's still important to be aware of these things. Research suggests that circumcision may lower the risk of certain STIs, including HIV and HPV, which can sometimes lead to cancer. The foreskin can create a warm, moist environment where bacteria and viruses can linger a little longer, which might make infections more likely. Again, it's not about saying one way is always better than the other. It's more about understanding the facts so that we can make thoughtful decisions for ourselves or offer good advice when someone close to us asks. Knowledge, after all, is one of the best tools we have for looking after ourselves as we get older. Speaking of cancer, there's another point that doesn't get mentioned as often but is worth touching on: penile cancer. Thankfully, it's very rare, especially here in places with good healthcare access. But there is a small difference in risk depending on circumcision status. Men who are circumcised have a slightly lower risk of developing penile cancer. It's not a guarantee either way, and again, we're talking about something that affects only a very small number of men. But it's still part of the larger picture when we're weighing the pros and cons. Now, it's important to say here that cancer risks can also be influenced by many other factors: smoking, overall health, family history. Circumcision is just one piece of that puzzle, not the whole thing. It's like asking if wearing sunscreen prevents skin cancer. Yes, it helps, but it's also about staying in the shade, wearing a hat, and getting regular checkups. The same idea applies here. At this point, you might be wondering if all these medical considerations make circumcision the obvious choice. But it's really not so black and white. Many men live their entire lives uncircumcised without ever experiencing these issues, especially if they've practiced good hygiene and have regular health checkups. And there are some things about having a foreskin that some men find more comfortable or preferable, especially when it comes to sensitivity and sexual sensation. That brings us gently to the next part of our conversation: intimacy and personal comfort. Let's be honest, our bodies change as we get older. Things that once felt automatic might need a little extra care or attention. And whether a man is circumcised or not can have some subtle effects on how things feel during intimate moments. Some men say that being uncircumcised feels more natural or sensitive, while others find circumcision makes things simpler and more comfortable, especially if they had issues with tightness or infections in the past. It's really about personal experience. There's no one-size-fits-all answer. And that's why it's so valuable to have these conversations openly and honestly, because what matters most is feeling comfortable, confident, and well-informed, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally too. Now, if you're someone who's already set in your ways and feeling fine with how things are, there's absolutely no reason to rush into changing anything. For many seniors, the choice to consider circumcision only comes up if a doctor recommends it for specific health reasons, like recurring infections or phimosis. Otherwise, focusing on good hygiene, regular checkups, and paying attention to how your body feels is really all that's needed. And if there's someone in your life, maybe a son or grandson, asking for your thoughts or advice about circumcision, you'll now have a bit more background to share. Sometimes these conversations come up at unexpected times, and having the confidence to speak on them with clarity and kindness can really make a difference for the younger folks looking up to us. What I hope you're taking from this so far is not a sense of worry or urgency, but rather a calm, steady understanding that there are different paths when it comes to health, and that both circumcised and uncircumcised men can live full, healthy lives. The real key is staying informed, looking after ourselves, and not being afraid to ask questions or seek help when we need it. So, let's keep this conversation going. We've looked at hygiene, medical risks, and a little bit about intimacy and personal comfort. There's still more to explore, especially when it comes to making thoughtful choices and finding peace of mind about whichever path feels right for you or your loved ones. When it comes right down to it, so much of this conversation about circumcision or remaining uncircumcised is really about peace of mind. That quiet, steady feeling that comes from knowing we're making good choices for our health. Not because someone told us we had to, but because we've taken the time to understand what feels right for us personally. One thing I've learned over the years, and maybe you have too, is that health isn't just about treating problems as they come. It's about paying attention to the little signals our bodies give us before things become bigger concerns. A little irritation here, a bit of discomfort there. It might not seem like much at first, but ignoring it can lead to stress and bigger challenges down the line. That's why having a handle on these things, even topics we don't usually talk about like circumcision, is so valuable. We've already touched on how hygiene, infections, and cancer risks factor into the picture. But let's not forget the emotional side of things. For many men, especially as we move into our 60s and beyond, personal comfort becomes just as important as physical health. We want things to feel easy. We want our routines to be simple, and we don't want to spend too much time worrying about little issues that used to seem insignificant. Whether it's managing medications or finding shoes that don't hurt our feet, simplicity matters more than ever. That's why, for some men, circumcision later in life can actually feel like a weight lifted. Not because it changes everything overnight, but because it eliminates some of those small recurring concerns, worries about infections, tightness, or discomfort that can crop up at inconvenient times. And let me say this again clearly. It's a personal choice. It's not about what anyone else thinks you should do. It's about what makes you feel confident and comfortable in your own skin, literally and figuratively. Now, you might be asking yourself, how do I even start making that decision if it ever comes up? That's a great question. The best place to begin is with an honest conversation with your doctor. Explain any concerns you might have. Maybe it's a hygiene issue, maybe it's discomfort, or maybe you're just curious if circumcision would change anything for you health-wise. A good doctor will walk you through the medical side, explaining the procedure, the recovery time, and whether it's even necessary for your particular situation. For most seniors, the choice is not made lightly, and it doesn't have to be rushed. It's perfectly okay to take your time, think it over, and maybe even talk to family members if that helps you feel more settled about it. And if there's no medical reason to consider circumcision, and you're feeling good and healthy as things are, that's just as valid too. Staying mindful of your body, keeping up with regular hygiene, and listening to how you feel day to day is really what matters most. And while we're talking about all of this, it's also a great reminder of how valuable those quiet, everyday habits are. Things like drinking enough water, staying active, and staying connected with the people we care about. Because health isn't just about physical details, it's about feeling strong, capable, and at ease in our lives as a whole. It's funny, isn't it? Sometimes the topics we least expect to be important like whether or not someone has a foreskin, turn out to be good reminders about how interconnected everything really is. Physical health, mental health, emotional well-being, it's all part of the same picture. Taking care of ourselves in one area tends to support the others too. So as we bring this conversation to a close, I'd like to leave you with one gentle thought. No matter which path feels right for you or for the men in your life, the real goal is to live comfortably, confidently, and with peace of mind. There's no perfect choice that fits everyone. What matters is making the choice that feels best for you, backed by good information and kind, thoughtful reflection. If this conversation has helped clear things up for you, or if it's sparked a question or thought you'd like to share, I'd really love to hear about it. Feel free to leave a comment below, whether it's about your own experiences or just a thought that's been on your mind. Sharing helps us all feel a little more connected, and you never know who might benefit from hearing your story. If you found this video helpful, I'd really appreciate it if you'd give it a thumbs up. It lets me know these kinds of topics are worth exploring together. And if you'd like to keep learning with me about simple, down-to-earth ways to stay healthy and happy as we age, make sure to hit that subscribe button. There's always something new to discover, and I'd love for you to be part of it. Thank you so much for spending this time with me today. It's been a real pleasure having this conversation together. Open, honest, and hopefully helpful. Here's to living your best life at any age, feeling confident in your choices, and staying well in both body and mind. Until next time, take care of yourself and those you love.